Now available in paperback and Kindle. Vampires stalk the darkness of the Eternal Night. Get your copy of Eternal Night in paperback and Kindle on Amazon.com. California has decided to outlaw electric cars. Now, starting in 2035, it is said that California is going to ban the sale of gas-powered vehicles, and you could only buy electric vehicles after that. Now, I believe that this may be the biggest mistake that a state has made ever since Prohibition in the 1920s, and it may be an even bigger mistake than when the federal government went out here and made TV go digital in 2009. Now, in the case of Prohibition, this proved to be one of the biggest disasters for the government because it led to the rise of organized crime all across the country as people created black markets and bought whiskey illegally all across the United States. And the problem got so bad that the government had to repeal Prohibition back in 1933 because it was basically just people were going to do whatever they wanted and they were looking to flout the laws. So that was one of the biggest failures in United States history as related to legislation, and we might be in for another big mistake like we had in 2009 when the United States decided to end its analog broadcasts of television and decided to create digital television channels on the ASTC format. Now, this plan had been put into place for years. However, once it was put into place in 2009, it was the TV networks that wound up suffering at the end of the day because they wound up losing a good majority of their audience. Now, that audience was quite captive when we had analog TV signals, and the audience was willing to stay because the signal was coming into their home. But once people were forced to convert to converter boxes or buy new televisions altogether, this is what led to people walking away from broadcast and cable TV over to your internet, and this basically led to a decline in network ratings that mainstream television has never really recovered from in the last 11 to 12 years. So TV went digital and it was a failure. The Prohibition was a failure, and I believe electric cars might be the next biggest failure since the Ford Pinto in the 70s and the Chevrolet Corvair in the 60s. And both of those cars were notorious for the flaws as related to their design, which made them some of the most dangerous cars in American history. And I believe that the electric car and the way they are approaching the electric car may be dangerous for America's economy because many of the politicians pushing these electric cars as part of their attempts to go green really aren't thinking critically about the economic infrastructure regarding sustaining these electric cars. Now, a gas-powered car has infrastructure to support it, like gas stations, and these vehicles can be sustained all across the country. However, we don't have a strong enough electrical grid that can sustain a large amount of electric vehicles, in addition to all of the computer servers and all of the other appliances all across this country. Because if California cannot even handle people putting on air conditioners on a summer day and have rolling blackouts all across the state in order to deal with a hot day, then how can they handle electric cars possibly being charged all across the state on any given day? That's a critical question I want to ask all of these greenies and these woke types who want to sit there and want to push electric cars. How are you going to sustain these cars if you cannot even handle having air conditioning on a 90-degree day without a rolling blackout? And how are you going to be able to sustain all of these vehicles as people are commuting? Because in commutes, these cars are running on batteries, and if you're stuck in a situation where there's an accident or there's some sort of issue that holds up traffic, some people's batteries may run out before they can get to their destination, further causing even more delays as related to traffic. So this whole plan is not really thought out too well, and it seems like there are no critical thinkers behind it. It seems like there's a lot of people running on feelings because they're not really thinking critically about the technology that is powering electric cars, which are lithium-ion batteries. And your lithium-ion batteries, yes, they can hold a charge for an extended period of time, but they have serious issues as related to their design. Now, I recently bought a cell phone battery to replace the one in my cell phone, and I bought this battery to replace that one in my phone, and that battery puffed up like this. And I would think it would be quite dangerous to have people driving electric cars because lithium-ion batteries, they are not very safe as I see it, because what will happen with this battery over a use of an extended period of time is you might wind up in a situation where the gases puff up like this, and that could make it dangerous for drivers, and it could also make it dangerous for those who are around those drivers, because what can happen when you have these lithium-ion batteries is they could possibly wind up with the gas escaping or wind up exploding, and that could lead to the possible fire in the vehicle, or it could possibly lead to the deaths of individuals who are in the vicinity of these vehicles. Because when these batteries puff up, they become a danger to everyone around them, and they are a danger because these batteries, the chemicals in them, are unstable at that point, and that's not something many politicians are thinking critically about. These batteries and how unstable they are, they're not thinking, hey, this battery could possibly wind up lighting on fire, or this battery could wind up exploding. And that's something they're not thinking about. All they're thinking about is carbon footprints, carbon emissions, but what about the lives of individuals who are put in jeopardy by these batteries? Because until you can refine the technology for these batteries, I think we should just minimize the use of electric cars and not try to go all the way like this. I believe that there needs to be more time taken, and you need to not go out here and stop the sale of gas-powered vehicles, because electric vehicles still have not worked out all of their bugs. And until you can work out the bugs as related to these batteries, you really need to be careful about this. Now, the other problem with the batteries in electric cars is the fact that these batteries they have a short shelf life. And you're pushing a vehicle that is going to be out here with these kind of batteries, but these batteries, as I know from owning several MacBook Pros and laptops, they really don't last that long. I mean, once you start using an electric battery from this lithium ion, it starts to degrade, and I probably think that possibly would happen with an electric car. Eventually the batteries would start degrading, and you would not be able to get the amount of range you would be able to like you would with a brand new with gasoline. Because with gasoline, you can just go in to a gas station, refill your car with gas, and be on your way. But with an electric car, the battery, you may have a battery in it, but it's going to degrade, and you're going to get less distance, and that's going to take more time as you charge this car, and it's going to take time for this battery to charge. Now, they say these batteries take anywhere from 7 to 8 hours to recharge, and that's not really efficient for people who are trying to get from point A to point B. Because if it takes 7 to 8 hours to charge a battery, then how is that going to be able to help people who have to go out here and do things like make deliveries or go out here and have business to do? Now, that's another problem many people aren't thinking critically about as related to these batteries, and they're not really thinking about the problems as related to charging stations. Now, charging up one of these batteries is really expensive, and that makes it where people won't be able to go out here and travel, and that also is going to have an impact on other industries like travel and tourism, So I'm looking at the way these leftists are pushing these cars, and they're basically looking to do long-term damage to the economies and the infrastructure of states like California and other blue states, which want to try to push these cars before the technology is ready. Now, when it came down to the automobile, it revolutionized American industry. And yes, there were people who were still with their horse and buggies, but the whole thing was people didn't try to force the change. They let the change happen organically, because you can't rush change. You have to let it take its time. And right now, I believe people are trying to rush things, and they're rushing it too fast, because we're not ready for that kind of technology yet. You don't have the infrastructure to sustain these vehicles. You don't have the range that these vehicles need in order to replace gasoline vehicles, and you don't have people who can afford these vehicles. Now, the government wants to offer tax credits for these vehicles, but what automobile manufacturers are doing are just raising the price to cover the credit, which makes it where these vehicles will be impossible to buy. So the electric car, a lot of people want to push this thing, but it's not ready. The technology isn't there as related to the batteries. The batteries themselves, they basically are not there just yet. We need to have a battery that can go extended distance. Moreover, we need a battery that will be able to take all of the stresses that a gasoline-powered vehicle takes right now. Because right now, when we look at the so-called electric vehicle plans, they do not factor in natural disasters like hurricanes, like floods, and like snowstorms, which can basically drain a battery or make it render a vehicle inoperable. And they're not really thinking critically that, hey, if there's a flood or a hurricane, this vehicle actually becomes useless once this vehicle is subjected to water. Once you subject an electric anything to water, what that does is it shorts that vehicle completely out, and it renders all of the electric parts absolutely useless. So if there is a flood, if there is a hurricane, if there is a snowstorm, this vehicle is absolutely useless. Meanwhile, a gasoline-powered vehicle or a diesel-powered vehicle, that vehicle is still operable as long as there's fuel in the tank. And that's something many of the woke types and the greenies who want to push this new green energy aren't thinking critically about. They're not thinking critically about how this vehicle will function as related to rough weather, and they're again not really thinking critically. All they're doing is getting in their feelings about these electric cars, not understanding the shock to people's systems when they have to deal with all of the mishaps as related to these vehicles. And if we have a large amount of these vehicles out here and they're not able to function, that means the country will not be able to be productive. Because if a vehicle winds up not being able to be powered due to a natural disaster or a blackout, people are not going to be able to get to work, and people are not going to be able to go out here and clear things like roads or highways. That's what people aren't thinking critically about as related to these vehicles. All they're thinking about is carbon footprints and green emissions, when all you have to do is go to Psalms 24 verse 1, and you know you don't need to worry about any of those things. Because if you go to Psalms 24 verse 1, it tells you that the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, and God will provide for all of the needs of people. And the only people who want electric cars these days are those who have fear and don't have faith, and they don't trust God to continue to provide on His earth for people that He loves. That's the kind of people who want to try to ram electric cars down people's throats. And these are the kind of people who think, oh, if I force everybody to go my way and buy these cars, life will be better. But these same people will be miserable because they have an issue with control. And the problem is they want to control everyone because they have no control over themselves. and they think, oh, if I get you to buy this electric car, life will be better. No, these people will still be miserable because they will continue to complain no matter what, and they just want to have things their way, not understanding their way isn't going to work because they're running on feelings and not critically thinking about the impact of their decisions on the world. They're not really thinking about the big picture. All they're seeing is their part in it, and they see electric cars making the world so much better, not understanding that there are trade-offs for going out here and putting these type of vehicles on the streets, and that they may be more of a danger to other people if you don't work out all of the bugs as related to them. Because that lithium-ion battery, again, it's very risky. If they puff up like they do in laptops and cell phones once they get overworked, and it could be a hazard to other people, which could be a serious liability to many of these manufacturers if you get large amounts of these vehicles catching on fire and possibly taking the lives of people because somebody got in their feelings and wanted this and didn't really want to think about how it impacted other people. So when I look at the whole campaign for electric cars, it's just being pushed too hard, pushed too fast, and pushed too soon by leftists who just want to be right but don't want to think about the rights of others and their right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, if you want to see me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon, my PayPal, or my Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. And if you want to pick up some of my positive black fiction on the SJS Direct imprint, like the ISIS series, the E-Steam series, the John Haynes series, and the books of the Spencerella trilogy, you can find those books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find them on Smashwords, the iBook Store, and Google Play. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.